You walked right into the front of a ghost and you weren't even scared.
I knew you weren't a ghost. A ghost doesn't wear a sheet stamped SS Minnow.
Mama's this thing. Money.
All this money and nothing to do and nobody to do it with.
You remember that fateful 3-hour voyage, which was only intended to be a short pleasure trip, but accidentally created 3 legendary television seasons and a series of later reunion projects? That was Gilligan's Island, where a group of strangers were stranded in the middle of the ocean, every day struggling to find a way to leave the island, only to fail according to the most ridiculous scenarios in television history. However, behind the radiant smiles and the innocence on screen, the behind the scenes of the movie was a reality more chaotic and thorny than anyone could imagine. You will find it hard to believe when learning about the corners full of scandals from a female star nonchalantly bringing her lover into the dressing room, right during the break, to tragic romantic feelings far exceeding professional relationships, or even a series of private life scandals strong enough to tear down the clean image of the entire cast. Today, we will together flip over the 20 shocking secrets behind the lens of Gilligan's Island. 20. When the purest couple of the deserted island revealed their true faces, do you remember the sweet Mary Ann and the clumsy sailor Gilligan? In the memories of millions of viewers, they were symbols of purity, the most saintly souls in the middle of the vast ocean. One was the girl next door. Loved by everyone, the other was the bumbling guy with a gentle, untainted smile. But prepare yourself mentally, because hidden behind those angelic masks was a rebellious reality full of sinful pleasures. Behind the fun movie scenes, the film crew was shocked, many times witnessing this couple passionately entwined outside of acting hours, far exceeding all normal professional boundaries. Even a dark anecdote became an obsession for the crew when the stage lights went out. The demure Mary Ann and the innocent Gilligan stripped off all their clothes together, nonchalantly swimming naked in the lagoon in the dark of night. This naked truth was the nightmare that the producers had to use all their power to sink to the depths at all costs. Even more terrible, this instinctive relationship did not just stop at physical passion, but also led to legal scandals that shook public opinion. In 1998, Bob Denver was caught by the police while receiving forbidden good through the mail. In a moment of panic at the police station, he directly named Dawn Wells as the person who had been supplying these addictive substances to him since 1995. Although Denver later hurriedly changed his statement to cover for his co-star with a script about an anonymous fan, the holy image of both was forever torn apart. That dark jinx seemed to have attached itself to Dawn Wells' life, when years later she once again fell into the hands of the law in a situation no one expected. Right after her 69th birthday party in 2007, Mary Ann was stopped by the police in a state of extreme intoxication. An emergency search pulled out pungent, addictive substances right in her car, forcing her to pay the price with a prison sentence and a string of humiliating probation days, putting an end to the illusion of a flawless angel on screen. 19. Multi-million-dollar hit, but actors died penniless. We all know the terrible sweeping power of Gilligan's Island globally for over half a century, with profits reaching over $250 million. A number enough to turn anyone involved into a top millionaire. However, behind that brilliant aura is a cruel truth. While television empires reaped huge profits, the legendary cast did not receive any extra single penny from that giant fortune. This grim trap originated from the slave contracts of the 1960s. The cast was forced to sign unfair terms where they were only paid a meager fee for exactly the first 5 reruns. From the 6th time onwards, even if the movie was shown thousands of times, bringing in endless cash flow for the stations, the pockets of those who directly made that success were completely and brutally cut off. The painful irony reached its climax when every time they turned on the TV, they still saw their faces bringing in a lot of advertising money for others, while they themselves had to struggle with the reality of food and money. Most tragic was in 2018, Mary Ann. Dawn Wells, a beauty icon of a time, had to tearfully beg for donations from fans online to pay medical bills and piled up debts at the end of her life. Tina Louise once bitterly exposed the truth that they were squeezed like a lemon and thrown away by the Hollywood elite right in their own glory. It turns out the deserted island did not only imprison the characters in the script, but the cold-blooded contracts imprisoned the varied lives of the cast in a grim and destitute economic reality until their very last breath. 18. When the fate of the superstars was decided by the whim of a powerful woman. Do you remember the evenings eagerly waiting for Gilligan's Island to air, where the laughter was always boisterous enough to drown out all worries? The final episode was broadcast on April 17, 1967, to the surprise of millions of people. Despite being at the peak of fame and attracting a huge number of viewers, the film was still murdered, right when everyone was expecting an explosive fourth season. But the truth behind that sudden ending was a bucket of cold water thrown straight at the efforts of the entire crew. CBS coldly wiped out Gilligan's Island just to make room for Gunsmoke, the favorite program of Mrs. Babe Paley, the wife of CBS chairman William Paley. Just to please the personal hobby of a noble lady, the fate of those trapped on the island was left hanging for 14 long years, until the rescue movie version was released in 1978. The cruelty reached its peak when this decision was made in a sneaky and swift manner. The cast still entered the set with smiles on their lips, still burning with all their heart for every frame, without knowing that it was the last time they would stand under the lights. They were pushed out of their own destiny without a word of notice, without a farewell script, and without even a chance to say goodbye to the audience. Everything ended on a normal filming day, leaving an empty void and extreme shock for those who had dedicated their entire youth to that island. 17. Tina Louise brought her boyfriend into the dressing room to do sensitive things. Do you think a lunch break on set is simply taking a nap to recover? Perhaps Bob Denver thought so too. But then he quickly realized he was wrong. In his book, Bob Denver recounted that right on the set of Gilligan's Island, while he was trying to catch some sleep during a break, strange sounds from the dressing room next door began to ring out. Clearer and clearer. Initially, he tried to ignore it. But after only a few minutes, he immediately understood what was happening behind that door. It turns out Tina Louise had brought her boyfriend into her private dressing room right during the break. And both were having extremely sensitive actions right in the middle of the set, while the entire crew was still around. The sound was so loud that Denver could not stand it, forced to bang on the wall to demand silence. But the reaction after that was what truly made him speechless. According to his account, Tina Louise did not avoid it at all, but even responded frankly that such moments usually lasted more than 45 minutes, and she needed absolute concentration, so it was best if no one bothered her. It turns out the glamorous image on screen was only one part. While in real life, Tina Louise was bold to the point of making the entire set stand still. 16. The film crew received news of the president's assassination right while filming. Maybe you did not notice, but right in the middle of filming Gilligan's Island, a very famous event occurred, which was the historically shocking assassination, targeting President John F. Kennedy, causing the entire film crew to fall into a state of extreme shock. This event took place on November 22nd, 1963, exactly on the final filming day of the pilot episode, the first experimental episode. This was an extremely sensitive time because the fate of the entire series was still on the scale, not yet knowing if it would be approved for broadcast. Imagine in the middle of the busy working atmosphere to complete the foundational scenes for the deserted island, the radio on the set suddenly rang out with bad news from Dallas. Immediately, all fun acting activities were stalled. The entire film crew, from actors to backstage staff, stood rooted to the spot in a heavy and gloomy silence. the overwhelming pain from reality covered the entire set, making the humorous details being performed suddenly become out of place. Although that first episode was later still completed, the memory of the beginning of Gilligan's Island will forever be associated with one of the darkest pages of American history. 15. Alan Hale Jr. broke his arm but still filmed dangerous scenes. If I had to choose the most dedicated actor on Gilligan's Island, I would choose Alan Hale Jr. because what he did truly went far beyond the normal level. During a filming session for a scene with a coconut tree, Alan Hale Jr. had an accident and broke his arm. An injury that for many people would certainly require stopping immediately. But not him. Instead of informing the film crew, he decided to keep this matter a secret for 3 weeks, just so as not to slow down the production progress. And what is worth mentioning is that during that period of time, he still continued to film as if nothing had happened. Just imagine with a broken arm. He still performed heavy scenes, still moved, still acted, and even carried Bob Denver on his back in many segments. Just by looking at the way he worked, people understood why Alan Hale Jr. was always respected by his colleagues on the set. It was that professional dedication that helped him maintain a solid position in the hearts of the crew and the audience, far beyond what a mere role could bring. 14. Bob Denver was almost attacked by a real lion right on the set. Is it true that when watching the scene where the lion appears on the island, you only found it a bit funny and did not feel even a bit of danger? In reality, that moment almost became a serious accident right on the set. While filming with a trained lion, everything initially went exactly according to plan. The animal moved in the intended direction. The actors took their positions, the camera ran. Then suddenly, it lunged straight toward Bob Denver. The distance between him and the lion at that time was only a few feet. With no time to think, Denver immediately grabbed a nearby chair and used it as a shield to protect himself. The filming scene immediately fell into chaos. On one side was the actor, on the other was the animal weighing hundreds of kilograms, losing control. Fortunately, the situation stopped in time before anything terrible happened. But just one beat slower. Perhaps the story you are hearing now would have been completely different. 13. Millionaire. Jim Backus specialized in mooching meals off co-stars. It is ironic that the person playing the richest man on the island was the poorest whenever it was time to pay the bill. Dawn Wells, Marianne and Natalie Schaefer. Mrs. Howell once shared that Jim Backus very often invited them to lunch at restaurants near the set. The script always repeated perfectly. After having eaten their fill, when it was time for the waiter to bring the bill, Jim would begin performing the act of searching his pockets, and then exclaim in utter amazement that he had forgotten his wallet in the dressing room. The result was that the two women accompanying him always had to take turns paying for the Mr. Millionaire. This incident happened so frequently that it became a joke within the film crew. Even after the film ended in reunion sessions, the co-stars still did not forget to subtly remind him about the free lunches that Jim had skillfully circumvented the rules to obtain. Truly a ridiculous contrast between the upper-class demeanor on screen and the empty wallet reality in real life. 12. Tina Louise caused conflicts to the point that the male lead refused contact. We all know Tina Louise was a difficult girl on set, but you would not be able to imagine how far her diva behavior pushed everything. Behind the image of the glamorous ginger who always captured the spotlight, Tina was actually a source of suffocating tension throughout the filming period. She frequently made a series of outrageous demands for changes, from interfering with the script and costumes to small matters like forcing the repainting of the entire dressing room before agreeing to work. Even worse, Tina repeatedly rejected scenes with the reason that they were not suitable for a star's status, causing the entire film crew to stop and wait for hours to compromise. This arrogance, combined with the scandal of secretly bringing her boyfriend into the dressing room to do sensitive things right in the middle of a break, made her colleagues' view of her become extremely terrible. The consequence was an atmosphere of isolation surrounding Tina Louise. While other actors frequently gathered to laugh and talk happily after filming hours, Tina was always pushed to the fringes and sat dejectedly in a corner alone. The relationship between her and the male lead Bob Denver also fell into a state of complete freezing. Both restricted talking to each other to the maximum, only interacting when the camera started running, and as soon as the director shouted, "Cut!" everyone went to their own places. The rift was so great that Bob Denver once flatly refused to take photos with Tina, turning them into the most famous on the surface but not in the heart couple in television history at that time. 11. Bob Denver threatened to quit the role to force a credit change for his co-stars. Do you remember the familiar opening melody of Gilligan's Island? The part where each name appears as if introducing each member of the island before the story begins. It sounds simple like that, but behind it was a whole tense struggle. Initially, Tina Louise requested to have her name separated in the end credits, causing the two actors Russell Johnson and Dawn Wells to only be grouped under a rather faint line, as in the rest. A small detail, but it directly affected their position and recognition in the eyes of the audience. Bob Denver saw that and he did not accept it. Based on a clause in his contract, he made a very clear move if this was not changed. He was willing to put his name after Tina Louise, completely breaking the existing order. That was not just about the position of a name, but the way he stood up to protect his co-stars. Finally, everything was forced to be adjusted. The names of Russell Johnson and Dawn Wells were added to the opening song part, instead of being gathered together as before. 10. Paradise Island, actually located right next to a noisy highway. Have you ever dreamed of setting foot on the island in the movie A Green Place with white sand, swaying coconut trees, and the absolute silence of the vast ocean, completely separated from the human world? But if I said this island was not real at all, and it was just an artificial lagoon located right next to one of the busiest roads in America, would you be disappointed? In reality, Gilligan's deserted island was located at the CBS studio lot in Studio City, Los Angeles, right next to the Ventura Freeway. This created a ridiculous paradox. While the characters were screaming in despair because of being isolated in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, right in their ears were the roaring of engines, the loud honking of trucks, and the sirens of police from the crowded traffic just a few steps away. Every time a large vehicle passed by and honked the entire cast, performing primitive for scenes had to stop in frustration to wait for the urban noise to pass. Sound engineers had to fight extremely hard to filter out these modern sounds, aiming to deceive millions of viewers into believing that the characters were truly thousands of miles away from civilization. It turns out the paradise that we always dreamed of was just an artificial pool full of chemicals, tucked away in the heart of a dusty and noisy city. 9. The entire film crew fell ill because of filming in a dirty water tank. Do you remember the clear, deep blue lagoon where the whole crew often swam, splashed water, and survived each episode? It looked very poetic and cool, but in reality it was a horror. The lagoon in Gilligan's Island was actually just a large, stagnant water tank, freezing cold, murky, and not properly sanitized. The water stood still for weeks, was not replaced, and was full of algae and bacteria. Yet the actors and crew still had to soak, swim, and splash every day in that environment to film scenes. The result? A series of people in the film crew fell ill one after another. Severe flu skin infections, diarrhea, high fever. Many were so sick they could not move, but the production still forced them to continue filming to stay on schedule. No one dared to stop because of a dirty water tank. It turns out the fun underwater scenes that made the audience double over with laughter were a real nightmare for the entire crew. 8. Russell Johnson was once shot down in a plane and broke both legs. Do you love the character of the professor? Have you ever wondered why the professor acted so naturally and convincingly when expressing the feeling of being trapped and isolated on a deserted island? The answer lies in a tragic real-life chapter. Before becoming an actor, Russell Johnson was a real pilot in World War II. During a mission, his plane was shot down. He luckily survived, but had to suffer extremely heavy consequences, severely breaking both of his ankles. The physical pain, along with the feeling of despair when being trapped in the middle of the sea, was deeply imprinted in his memory. It was these real experiences that helped Russell Johnson embody the role of the professor in a deeply and incredibly authentic way. He did not just act the isolation, but he had truly experienced it. It turns out the intellectual who always thought of all ways to save the whole island carried within him a story of a true hero and tragedy from life. 7. Dawn Wells admitted once having feelings for a co-star. Not only having an ambiguous relationship with Bob Denver right on the set, Dawn Wells also personally admitted that she herself once had real romantic feelings for another man in the group, making the rumors about the private life of the girl next door become even more complicated. In an interview, Dawn Wells shocked everyone by revealing that the person who truly made her heart flutter was not the clumsy guy Gilligan, but exactly the calm professor played by Russell Johnson. She did not hesitate to admit that between the two of them, there was an intense attraction from the very first days of filming. Even Dawn firmly asserted that if both had been single at that time, this relationship certainly would not have just stopped at the level of colleagues, but would have gone much further. Imagine behind the lens of pure Marianne was nurturing a silent affection for the intellectual professor. However, the biggest barrier was reality. Both already had their own families. Because of self-respect and respect for each other's homes, they were forced to suppress their personal emotions, keeping the relationship at the level of close friends so that the film could continue to operate professionally. It turns out the pain of feelings are apparent. Moments between Marianne and the professor that you saw on the screen were not entirely acting. Those were real feelings, but forever had to be hidden behind the standards of real life. 6. Jim Backus filmed while in a state of having consumed alcohol. Do you remember the character Thurston Howell III? The arrogant millionaire, always holding a cane in his hand and wearing luxurious outfits as if vacationing in Saint-Tropez rather than being stranded on a deserted island. That was a role that required elegance sometimes, even the characteristic arrogance of the upper class. But it seems that to maintain that eccentric demeanor and those humorous lines, Jim Backus had a behind-the-scenes secret that not everyone dared to make public. In reality, Jim Backus was famous for having problems with alcohol in real life. And this truth spilled over into his work on Gilligan's Island. There are anecdotes passed around within the film crew that he performed many scenes in a state of being completely not sober, or to put it bluntly, had been drinking right before the camera started running. What made everyone both fearful and admiring was his acting performance. Despite having alcohol in his system, Jim Backus still maintained an incredible stability, completing segments so smoothly that if one did not witness him drinking with their own eyes, perhaps no one would realize the millionaire was drunk. 5. Tina Louise was tricked into signing the contract and trapped with the role for a lifetime. What you just knew about Tina Louise on the set might make you think she was someone who was difficult to integrate. But looking back from the beginning, this story was perhaps predestined from the moment she accepted the role. When joining Gilligan's Island, Tina Louise believed that this was only a short-term project, about a few months, and then it would end. A temporary role enough to appear, then move on to bigger opportunities. But everything did not happen like that. The film suddenly became a phenomenon, and the character Ginger quickly became tightly attached to her name. From then on, the audience no longer saw a diverse actress, but only remembered the glamorous redhead on the deserted island. And that exactly was the problem. The more famous she became, the more she was stuck in that image. Other opportunities became more difficult as any role she accepted was compared to Ginger. Later, Tina Louise admitted that the decision to accept the role with the thought of only a few months became the thing she regretted the most. 4. Alan Hale Jr. almost drowned because of a betraying costume. Not only did Dawn Wells almost lose her life under the lion's claws, but even the large skipper, Alan Hale Jr., once experienced horrifying life and death moments right before the eyes of the film crew. In an underwater scene, Alan Hale Jr. had to perform a segment of jumping into the sea to save other members. However, a fatal error occurred with his costume. The thick nautical jacket, along with the specialized boots when soaked with water, became a heavy anchor, weighing dozens of kilograms, pulling the actor down to the bottom of the filming tank. Instead of surfacing as in the script, Alan Hale Jr. began to struggle in vain. The scariest thing was that the film crew initially thought he was acting too deeply in the distress scene. It took a long while when noticing his face change color, and the air bubbles were no longer normal that the rescue divers panic-strickenly dove down. When pulled ashore, the brave skipper had fallen into a state of exhaustion and almost stopped breathing. 3. Natalie Schafer performed her own dangerous scenes despite being over 60 years old. Besides Alan Hale Jr., who was extremely dedicated to his profession, Natalie Schafer was also one of the most devoted actors in this film. Do you remember the millionaire's wife, Lovey Howell, who always appeared with a noble look, magnificent dresses, and a demeanor as if she only knew how to enjoy herself? In reality, Natalie Schafer in real life also came from the wealthy class and had a high-class lifestyle no less than her character. But do not let that golden leaf on a jade branch appearance deceive you, because her working spirit on the set made even young actors have to take off their hats. Even though she had turned 64 when starting to participate in Gilligan's Island, an age where most people choose leisure, Natalie still refused to use stunt doubles. There were segments that required the character to jump into the water or perform adventurous action scenes in the middle of the deserted island, and she performed them all by herself in a decisive manner. Imagine a woman over 60 years old, originally accustomed to velvet and silk, being ready to throw herself into a lake or exert herself in strenuous filming scenes without a single word of complaint. This devotion did not only come from professional acting skills, but also from a will of steel wanting to prove that age is just numbers. 2. Bob Denver married 4 times with a private life completely opposite to the film. Far from the clumsy Gilligan, who was always awkward and never knew how to score points with the females on the deserted island, Bob Denver's real life was a series of ladies and romances more fleeting than anyone could imagine. Bob Denver had a total of 4 marriages in his life. His personal life was described as extremely complex and full of fluctuations, a reality completely opposite to the innocent, simple and somewhat clueless image of Gilligan that he portrayed on screen for many years. It is ironic that the audience kept mulling over and laughing at the silly situations of a single sailor. While behind the lens, Bob Denver was busy searching for a happy harbor through consecutive breakups. These successive marriages not only revealed a very different human side of the actor, but also served as a testament to the fact that the brilliant glory of a career sometimes cannot fill the storms in private life. 1. Tina Louise refused all reunions because she hated the role. It seems that Tina Louise is a very prominent name in the behind-the-scenes of Gilligan's Island, as the truths about her are so many, and most of them are tinged with dissatisfaction and indelible distances from her colleagues. After the film ended, while other members excitedly participated in interviews or reunion projects, to pay tribute to the audience, Tina Louise almost never appeared. She gradually refused to mention the name Ginger, and determinedly did not want to be associated with the image of the glamorous redhead on the deserted island anymore. It is ironic that the role that brought the most illustrious fame to her career was exactly the iron cage that she wanted to break the most. Instead of being proud of the film's legacy, Tina considered it a mistake that suffocated her diverse acting ability, causing her to be typecast in the eyes of Hollywood directors for many decades. This blunt turning away was not only a refusal of a job, but also a complete severance from the past. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss our next videos. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video.